My Galanen, this is the Talking Shed talking, and I have watched the worst cinematic battle yet this year. Oh, sorry, I meant to say I've watched episode 7 of The Rings of Power, my bad. But isn't that the same thing? Let's find out. Welcome to episode 7 of The Rings of Power. Doomed to suck, doomed to die, damn it! What is it with me today? Get it together, Shed. Alright, now for real, episode 7, let's go. The episode starts with Celebrimbor enjoying a peaceful morning in his forge. We learn that he is close to finishing the 9 rings from men, but what breakthrough he made after countless failed attempts, we don't know. While working, he notices that a gem from Thanos' hammer is missing. Looking for it, he catches his own reflection in the mirror and sees a tired and dirty face, definitely not fitting what he feels like at the moment. Thanks to that, we see that Annatar's spell doesn't work on mirrors, but a moment later everything seems normal again, and we see Annatar himself, who has come to ask how much time it will take to finish the rings. Celebrimbor answers that it will be a few days. That is one of 2 remarks regarding time in this scene. The other one is when Celebrimbor says that for the last few weeks he has felt great clarity. Both these lines together make a new problem in the timeline. Firstly, what weeks are we talking about? Last we saw Celebrimbor, he was in great distress, forgetting things, being frustrated at the rings not working, so the peaceful time must refer to the time after that, when he was working alone. The fact that time is behaving strangely is confirmed in the aforementioned line about the rings being finished in few days. Because they will be in fact finished in this episode, but the episode itself ends next morning. And it starts in the morning after the last one ended. It cannot be otherwise, the siege just started. So Celebrimbor must be experiencing time in a different manner than other people. This creates problems because of his awareness of his surroundings, but that will be discussed later. Now let's focus only on the fact that Sauron has the power to manipulate the perception of time, to extend it somehow. This power is of the kind that I like to call world-breaking. They cannot be given to characters because they are too useful and guarantee them victory in any circumstance. To be exact, the ability to manipulate time is not necessarily world-breaking, provided that there is a rock-solid reason every time the character doesn't use it. So, unless there appears some evidence that my interpretation of Celebrimbor's perception of time is incorrect, or some limitation to Sauron's power, I will be reminding you that Sauron can bend time at his will and he is not doing it, at every instance that he forgets this extremely useful device. Alright, so I have given Sauron's character the ability to manipulate time and space, but I was only joking. The script was so terribly written that there was no other viable justification, but the creators wanted to have us believe he traveled the distance by regular means. Here, they established true powers of time manipulation. We then see the ongoing siege and the city burning. Apparently, the elves did not respond to the bombardment in any way, only now do they want to counterattack. Annatar says that Celebrimbor forbade that, but they cannot listen to him. He, Annatar, is now taking command over their defenses. In a moment alone with Myrddania, one of the smiths, the one that saw him in the unseen world and was told that the dark figure she saw was Celebrimbor, he tells her that Celebrimbor's mind is gone. Then the orcs decide to refocus their bombardment on the mountain beside the city. With a few perfectly calculated shots, they destroy the mountainside, and as a result, giant boulders fall into the river, blocking it and allowing for the ground assault. Now, a quick tangent about dams and water. Water is like sand. Maybe not so rough, but it gets everywhere. Have you ever tried to build a dam? It takes damn long to fit all the pieces and make them watertight. And the water builds up, and if there is no other way, it goes over the dam. As you can see, these boulders are hardly a tight structure, so water should keep flowing, and even if Adar played the perfect game of Tetris here, the water has nowhere else to go. It will go over, and it will do so soon. So there is no way that the river just stops. But, of course, laws of physics have no power here, and the water dries up in a minute and never returns. Alright, now we know that Adar is a master dam builder. Next we see Arondir, who has reached the city. Then we see Celebrimbor, who makes some progress on the rings, but he is also very suspicious of his surroundings, and he marks one of the candles to check if it burns down. Then we move to Khazad Dûm, where Narvi informs the king that a region is under siege. How does he know that? Well, an elf came to Khazad-dûm with the news. But the king doesn't want to help the elves, even though if they lose, he won't have any clients for his precious mithril armor and weapons. But never mind that, the king orders Na'vi to retake the mines. Apparently this has but stopped the entire process of mithril extraction. Was there only one entrance to the mines? Or are the bats so scary? Anyway, next we see Narvi and his dwarves. They refuse the king's orders and stand alongside Durin. This as planned has worked. Then Durin is informed that the elven messenger wants to talk to him. And who could that be? Well, for a short while I thought that it could be a nameless elf from a region, but then I remembered that the only thing that nameless characters do in this show is die. So, who is it? Well, Celebrimbor is trapped in the tower, Myrddania and Arondir watch the siege, Galadriel is imprisoned, Gil-galad sits in Lindon with Elrond, Círdan... Who is Círdan? Well, I suppose you guessed the messenger. It's Elrond. Teleporting once again. Him appearing in Khazad-dûm seems impossible. In the time he needed to get to Lindon and back, a region would be sieged down and destroyed. But, of course he's there, it's much more dramatic this way. Elrond asks Durin for help in the fight against the orcs, Adar, Sauron? I don't know, because he doesn't reveal any information. I wish we could hear what Elrond has to say. Imagine that conversation. This Halbrand was Sauron all along. We believe he got back to Eregion to create more rings. Oi, we've got one round here, brought by this Annatar. He must be Sauron! We must tell everyone! And so on. Mentioning Sauron on Elrond's part and the ring on Durin's seems extremely important. But the only thing that Durin tells Elrond is that he is about to overthrow his father, and the elf doesn't even ask what happened. They haven't seen each other for a long while, they have so much to catch up with, but who would care for character when we can cut away dramatically? So now we know that King Durin the puppet doesn't see the need to have business partners, and we must conclude that he is blinded by greed for a change. And now Elrond... Oh, that's a lot of text. Let's make some space. Keep in mind that those other traits are still there. In the final video I will summarize them all. And now to his abilities we can add teleportation. Now we see that the river completely dried up and the orcs are running towards Eregion. Elves shoot arrows, many orcs die, and I must ask, have orcs heard of shields? They would be useful, much more useful than this machine they brought. It's supposed to tear off the building pieces of the wall, just as you see on the screen, but physics don't work that way. If you hammer those giant nails in and then release the mechanism, the machine will only pull them off, not the stones. Anyway, it takes hours to break through the wall, and this contraption looks hella flammable to me. Fortunately for the orcs, elves have no way to set anything on fire, that is provided you don't watch the rest of the battle. Also, we are told that the orcs use the machine on the thinnest part of the wall, as confirmed by the defenders, but how do they know where it is the thinnest? The whole concept is idiotic, and I would like to add that orcs have no other piece of equipment with them except about 3 ladders. So, Adar is a terrible tactician, and he doesn't care about the orcs because he doesn't give them any shields. Then Celebrimbor confronts Annatar, showing all the weird stuff that happened around him all day, like a mouse running around in the same pattern or the candle not burning down at all. He suspects that Annatar is behind all this, Annatar effectively confirms it, and Celebrimbor finally realizes.
No emissary of the Valar would do this!
Annatar shouts at him back, aggressively demanding the 9. Well, not a very smart move. He effectively compromises his position, he still could pretend to be a friend. It's not as bad as the finale of Season 1, where he decides to reveal his identity even though it's completely unnecessary, but it's still not an advisable strategy. So, Celebrimbor throws the hammer at him, breaks the window, and this time the sound of the siege reaches him. He looks out and sees the dying city. The illusion is broken. So, Annatar sorta brought this on himself. There are elements of this illusion he simply doesn't have to create, like mice. Why would he make an illusion that is noticeably flawed when he gains nothing from it? Also, if Celebrimbor spent weeks in this illusion, at least on his part it seems so, he should have noticed that nothing works properly. For example, he hasn't changed the candles for days. But only now does he notice anything strange. Also, he says that the candles haven't burned an inch the whole day, when it appears that only an hour or so has passed, which makes the time-bending theory even more believable, of course with all its unbelievable problems. Moving on, when Celebrimbor looks back, he realizes that the illusion concealed the fact that large parts of the forge were destroyed by the bombardment. He also appears wounded now. So we have to assume that he was at risk of death all this time. It seems extremely lucky he wasn't hit by a flying boulder or the falling rubble. Also, we must conclude that Celebrimbor cannot have interacted with the real physical world. He would have encountered the damaged elements of the forge and wouldn't be able to use them. Yet he had to use the forge to make the very real rings. And another problem, a hammer thrown at the window bashed the illusion, but a projectile from a trebuchet didn't? How do you explain that, show? And that's not the end of the issues. Why does Annatar need Celebrimbor to stay in Eregion anyway? If the orcs are attacking, wouldn't it be better to escape and make the rings somewhere else? This way nobody would know where to look for him and Celebrimbor could do his work in peace. He was already convinced that the rings need to be made. Why keep him in the place where he is at risk of death and Annatar's plans are at risk of being compromised? And yes, they can escape. Orcs are only on the one side of the city, the other one is conveniently never shown, but we know that leaving the city is possible. Annatar already did so. Now back to the scene. I wonder how long will it take until we encounter something ridiculous. Oh, there it is. The very next thing we learn is that Celebrimbor wasn't using mithril but Sauron's blood. I have to admit, I like it and hate it at the same time. But my hate is stronger. Meaning of course that what little there is of a good idea is outweighed by all the problems that come with it. What's good in there? It's the first attempt at explaining the corruption of the rings and Sauron's control over them. If I am correct, it is his blood that will allow him to have the greatest influence on the Nine, and as we know, they will create his most faithful servants, the Nazgul. This solution partially covers some of the questions about the control he has of the rings, but it is not problem-free, far from it. First of all, how does one make a ring out of someone's blood? To state the obvious, the rings are made of metal. When you replace metal with blood, what do you get? Also, it was mithril that was the crucial magical ingredient that gave the rings their exceptional powers. Also, we still don't know why Celebrimbor wasn't able to make the 9 before. The other rings didn't require Sauron's blood to be made. I would very much prefer if all the rings were impossible to craft without a secret ingredient which later turned out to be Sauron's blood in disguise. But that's not what we get. I never thought I would utter such a sentence, but Sauron's blood cannot substitute mithril. Then Celebrimbor figures out that Annatar is Sauron and runs away. Extremely crucially and no less stupidly, Celebrimbor doesn't take the 9 and leaves the tower, and Sauron doesn't stop him. Then Celebrimbor finds Myrddania. She's on the walls and the whole conversation takes place there, and of course no orc thinks of shooting them or something, because the ongoing siege is not important when we have plot to deal with. Wait a second, why is a civilian on the walls? Well, as you will see in a moment, the plot wouldn't happen otherwise, so logic is no longer necessary. What happens? Celebrimbor tries to tell Myrddania everything, but he speaks actual gibberish about mice and rubies, so he doesn't convince her. He also fails to say the most important information, that Sauron, actual Lord of Evil, is among them. He does so only when Annatar comes, and then nobody believes him. Celebrimbor still tries to argue, and his proof is that Sauron has black blood. He conveniently forgets that he is in this situation because Sauron is a master of illusions, and of course he shows them red blood. Then Myrddania tries to calm Celebrimbor down. She touches him, and as he rejects her gesture, Annatar uses this opportunity to push her off the wall with his magic so that it appears it is Celebrimbor's fault. Myrddania dies and everyone blames Celebrimbor. He just shrugged, but the bystanders believe it was enough to throw Myrddania with great strength. They also don't notice the strange movement of Sauron's hand. Celebrimbor is restrained and Annatar tells him to finish the 9 and then he will spare the city. By the way, other elves can hear him, but they are just background cardboard cutouts, so don't think about them. Alright, so Sauron reveals himself for no reason. Wait a second, this should be here since the finale of Season 1. And he is capable of telekinesis. Alright, and Celebrimbor, he can make metal rings out of blood. Then we hear the sound of horns in the distance, and we see the oncoming army of riders led by Gil-galad and Elrond, famous commander of... Oh, sorry. I checked, and he's not a warrior but a politician? And there are other commanders who could be leading the charge? Very strange. Oh, but maybe it's because we don't know the names of other commanders. How silly of me. Remember, if somebody in the show doesn't have a name, he or she doesn't in fact exist. Now, a few other questions, as is usual. What was all that Gil-galad's talk of not going to help Eregion about? Was it just a misdirection from the show? And how did Elrond get here? He teleported again from Khazad-dûm? You can't do that! That power must have a cooldown, it's too OP! Alrighty, back to the scene. The riders start charging, but then orcs reveal Galadriel in a cage and threaten to kill her if the attack doesn't stop. I see no reason why the elves should stop. There's no drawback. Orcs lose and you get rid of the most annoying creature ever? Count me in! But we are not so lucky today. Even though they are in full gallop, a short and quiet order from Elrond stops the whole army immediately. I mean, look at that. Because, yeah, of course you can stop a full-on charge in one split second. Also, I wonder what would happen if Elrond wasn't the commander. Did Addar's plan really rely on the elven army being led by someone who cares for Galadriel? You bet it was. Anyway, then negotiations start. Addar wants to see Galadriel's ring. Elrond responds that he would be foolish to bring it with him, and I cannot agree more. Then Galadriel says that they should have kept charging. And I realize now that I lied. I can agree more. Also, you are not fooling me, Elrond. You did bring the ring to the battle, precisely because it is stupid. Because that's what the show does. It relishes the stupid and the foolish and despises reason. By the way, the negotiations happen inside the orcs' camp. Elrond has no guarantee that he will leave it alive. He entered enemy territory and has no advantageous position. I told you, relishing the stupid. Anyhow, Addar presents his offer. He won't fight the elves, but they must let him destroy Eregion and defeat Sauron. The only thing he needs is Galadriel's ring. Elrond responds that he will not give it to him. In return, he is assured that Galadriel will be killed and then is allowed to bid her farewell. And then he kisses her. I was ready to rant about it, but to my great surprise I might defend it, but only because the kiss serves as a distraction to cover up the fact that Elrond gives Galadriel a brooch which she will later use to free herself. It is still weird to see Elrond kiss his mother-in-law, but if it is just a ruse, then it is justified, and the fact that in the Rings of Power Galadriel doesn't have a daughter makes it a bit less awkward. Well, Elrond then leaves, and his companion asks him why is he confident of their victory. Elrond informs him that the dwarves will come to help them. The elves are still in the orcs' camp. Elrond delivers his line in Sindarin, which may somewhat protect its secrecy, but then they switch to English, so it's very fortunate that no orc is listening. The line, "Write to them now," may have been of interest to Addar. Also, we learn that the orcs outnumber the elves 10-1. I was under the impression that the elves brought their whole army, all riders that they could gather, so I find it hard to believe. But further criticism is saved by the show's reluctance to provide any more information. We learn nothing more, and we don't really see the overview of the battlefield precise enough to speculate about the numbers on either side. This, of course, is a criticism of its own, as most of the time the battle has no graspable stakes, since we have no way of comparing the opposing forces and understanding who is winning. So, Elrond gains a new alias, he is now a commander of the elven armies. He teleports again. He believes it would be foolish to bring the ring to the battle. He is a risk-taker because he has no guarantee he will survive entering the orc camp, and he is careless with confidential information. And Addar risks the lives of his orcs as he relies on a small chance that the elves will stop their charge. Then we see three rather short scenes. In the first one, Galadriel unlocks her shackles. I have to ask, why does nobody pay any attention to her, and why is she still alive? There is no defense for the orcs not killing her immediately. In the second scene, we see Celebrimbor working on the rings supervised by Sauron. So apparently he is not resisting. Does he believe that Sauron will spare the city? Maybe, I don't know, but later he does try to oppose him, so why not now? Why doesn't he stall for time? But of course he must first finish the rings and then he will consider if it's even a good idea. And finally, Durin addresses other dwarves and calls them to arms against the orcs. His speech is rather good. He moves the dwarves' hearts by convincing them that there is a power stronger than armies and sorcery, it is dwarven loyalty. And all the dwarves cheer and agree to go to war because death is much better than those insane taxes. But I have to point out that there is no middle way between Narvi joining Durin and the entire population of Khazad-dûm listening to him. How did that happen? Also, the king seems oblivious to all of that and nobody seems to remember about him, which will become very relevant later. Apparently, I was foolishly under the impression that overthrowing a king will require some interaction with the said king. Alrighty, Adar doesn't kill Galadriel for no reason, Celebrimbor doesn't resist even though he now knows that Annatar is Sauron, and Durin is good at speeches. We then see elven cavalry fighting the orcs, in the woods. We see them right there willingly, and of course losing the charging advantage the cavalry has as a result. And it's not like there is no other way, we see the opening here. So whoever Elrond is commanding this army is a terrible commander. Also, one more interesting scene with our genius commander. His horse dies and in revenge he launches the orc that killed it from a trebuchet, together with the trebuchet's projectile. So, no easy way to say this, but Elrond is ready to risk the lives of civilians and his own allies in order to avenge his dead horse. Is that a war crime? Maybe not, I don't know, it sounds like a crime. A crime of being stupid, perhaps. So, Elrond is a terrible commander, and he values revenge over the lives of others. It is now nighttime, and because the show has a small budget of $1 billion, instead of the fight that happened throughout the day, we get a summary of all events in form of a report presented to Ada by one of the orcs. The walls of a region are stronger than they thought, elves are not yielding, and they have destroyed 5 trebuchets. The orc asks Adar if they should retreat, but Adar doesn't want to hear about it. Orcs seem to notice that he doesn't care for their lives as much as they thought. Then Adar discovers that Galadriel escaped. Thanks to some dark magic, aka reading the script again, he knows she is still in the camp and orders to find her. What can I say, Adar? If you were an Uruk of your word, you wouldn't have that problem, you would have killed her. You had all the reason and all the time. Anyway, we see Galadriel sneaking around the camp. She has a hood on, but is that the best she can do? Put some mud on your face or wear a helmet. It's pretty easy to do, and you wouldn't stand out so much. Anyhow, she sees Ada mourning the dead orcs and moves further, but some of the orcs follow her. In the moment she is discovered, 3 arrows come from an unknown direction and kill the orcs that surrounded her. Galadriel uses the opportunity to leave the camp, and she meets her savior, who turns out to be Arondir. Arondir, who apparently did nothing for the entire day, just waited there. Also, as she updates him about the situation, he doesn't even react to the news that Sauron is in the city. I mean, that's quite a revelation. How can he be so chill about it? Well, he says that his sole purpose is to kill Ada, but this doesn't justify his lack of reaction. And also, if that's so, why didn't he make any attempt the whole day? You know what? Never mind that. Galadriel quickly talks him out of it. She asks Arondir to go with her into the city by a secret way she knows. The what now? Sure, you cannot just insert the setup in the very scene you want the payoff to be in. That's called Deus Ex Machina. Out of the blue there appears a new solution we couldn't have known about. There is nothing satisfying about it. Well, that is at least consistent with the rest of the story. Alright, so Adar mourns the dead orcs, so he cares for them, we know that, and we know the opposite, and he reads the script again. And Arondir, he stood around and did nothing for the whole day, and he's driven by vengeance for about a minute. Then, in Khazad-dûm, Narvi informs Durin that his father started fighting against other dwarves, he used his super strength, went into the mines and started digging. Now, they believe that his digging will rouse the beast in the depths and Khazad-dûm will be lost. So the only sensible solution is to use the whole army to get the king. What the Balrog is wrong with you? I mean, even if we accept that they somehow know that it is the digging that will provoke the beast, and they are certain that King's effort will be enough to do it, man, I simply don't believe that 24 dwarves won't be able to restrain the old man. Hey, maybe even this as bats would do the job. The problem simply isn't grave enough to justify not going to help the elves, and Durin can split his forces. And the whole thing is even more frustrating because there is such an easy solution. Let the Balrog come out now. Show us that Khazad-dûm is at risk of being actually destroyed. Show us the threat that requires that every soldier takes part in the fight. Of course, you would have to resign from keeping the fight with Balrog to the last episode, but we already know that the beast is there, and the writing was on the wall. The creators did everything they could to show us the king's greed and that he is digging too deep. There is no mystery around it, so is it really worth it to sacrifice reason in order to delay this absolutely unsurprising revelation till the last moment? Sadly, Durin is yet another clown for not splitting his forces. Then we see the defenders of Eregion throwing some easily flammable substance on the orcs and setting them on fire. Look at that! Who wrote napalm here? It's certainly not a part of the law. Also, since you have it already, I have an idea. Light the only siege machine the orcs brought and your walls will be safe. Or are you too dumb to do even that? Also, why use it only now? Maybe that's the thing. They can use this napalm, but only at night, when it looks better, and only when friendly soldiers are around, and never against enemy siege equipment. Otherwise, I have no explanation. Then Celebrimbor has some meaningless dialogue with Sauron, and only then does he realize he can stand in the way of Sauron's plans. In the next scene, we see him take the rings and throw them into the fire. What is Sauron's reaction, you ask? Well, he's not there, that's the answer. Why does he leave? What else does he have to do? He obviously doesn't care for the city, and we see him nowhere on the walls. So, where is he? Great questions, add them to the pile. Back to Celebrimbor, he soon realizes that the rings are immune to fire damage. He now knows that he has to run off with them, and he tries to break the shackles he has on. Unsuccessful, he comes to the conclusion that he has to cut off his own finger using one of his tools. And I understand the commitment and desperation, but he cut off his finger before he tried to use the device on his chain, the device that was shown cutting through metal. This would be a logical attempt, but no, we don't do that here. The finger goes first. And then he can take off his shackles and run away. As he leaves the tower, we see the town square and people running around and scream, "Hey, people of Eregion, are you special? You had the whole day to hide, and you know what? The orcs are only on one side of the city, you can run the other way. Has nobody thought of getting women and children away?" But maybe there is no way. The map just ends there or something. If only there was some secret tunnel. Anyway, an unlucky trebuchet shot lands near and Celebrimbor falls unconscious. What is especially funny is that earlier when he left the tower, he was also knocked unconscious by a projectile. I didn't mention it because it didn't influence the story at all, but it's ridiculous that the moment Celebrimbor leaves his forge, he is immediately the target of the enemy bombardment. Well, then he is found by some soldiers. Wait a second. This is one of them special scenes, isn't it? No matter where you turn, it's something ridiculous. What are the soldiers doing there? Don't you have an onslaught of orcs to fight off? Don't even bother. The soldiers take him back to the tower by the order of Annatar, whom they declare the Lord of Eregion. Celebrimbor doesn't reason with them, doesn't try to prove his sanity. But then Galadriel teleports into the scene. We never see the way she entered the city, she also came at the exact moment she needed to. How lucky for Celebrimbor. Galadriel orders the soldiers to release Celebrimbor, and they of course listen to her. Then she and Celebrimbor talk a bit about what happened. He takes responsibility for letting Sauron realize his plans. He tells her that he blinded himself, he took what he was offered despite a part of him sensing the evil in Annatar. Well, Galadriel can relate to that. Anyway, he gives her the rings so that she and all those she can help escape through the route she came in, the old dwarven tunnel. What about Celebrimbor? He wants to face Sauron and slow him down before he catches Galadriel and the rings. Alright, so Celebrimbor. He has even more spine, but one finger less. He is extremely unlucky, trebuchets just hate him. He blames himself for Sauron's success. And someone could call facing Sauron brave, but when you know as much as Celebrimbor, it's bloody stupid. And we also know that Sauron is careless, because he doesn't guard Celebrimbor. Back to the battlefield, we see one of Elrond's companions' death scene. She has a name, but why should I care? The first time it is mentioned, outside the subtitles, is this very scene, a minute before her death. Yet the show still tries its best, the tone of the scene very much resembles Boromir's death. But in order to have a meaningful death in a story, you usually have to have a meaningful build-up. Here it's, she was chosen by Elrond to go with him, she died, the end. And before she dies, she destroys something. When I first watched the scene, I thought it was the wall-breaking device, but it must be something different as the machine is okay later. This is entirely the show's fault, it fails to convey what is going on here. So yeah, we get this dramatic scene, she has to destroy a very dangerous machine, which we have never seen before. But she gets shot by about half a dozen arrows in a second. Yet she still hits this something with a torch arrow and it explodes because there is some conveniently placed, easily flammable substance next to it. Look at that explosion! Do they carry TNT there? Or maybe it's Numenorian wine. If only some other elf thought of that earlier. Perhaps one that is on the walls and had a whole day to think of it and shoot at the machine. Anyway, then the troll from episode 3 is sent by Ada to join the fight. Was he waiting there for the whole day? Don't think about it. When he enters the fight, he kills both elves and orcs. And one of the orcs, the good one with the family, his name is Glag, is terrified at the loss of orcish life and Ada's carelessness. Not much to add except for the fact that Ada doesn't care for the lives of the orcs. We know that, and we know the opposite. Then Celebrimbor comes back to the forge with a bunch of guards to confront Sauron. But Sauron uses his mind tricks and forces them all to kill each other except for Celebrimbor. So, what was the plan, Celebrimbor? What did you expect? You know that Sauron is OP. Did you really think that you can just arrest him and it would be over? Or did you bring the guards just for them to die? By the way, if Sauron can make people kill themselves just like that, he can do anything to anyone. Let's remember that for the future. Alright, so Sauron is capable of full mind control. Then the troll almost breaks the wall using the machine like a ram, but he is then defeated by joint forces of Arondir, Elrond and Gil-galad, who appears for the first time since the beginning of the battle. Then the orcs gather for the final assault, and the one named Glag doesn't go, and I get a feeling we might see more of him in the next episode. Then the sun rises, and Elrond believes that the dwarves will arrive any moment now, but there only comes the elf messenger he sent to them, bringing the news that Durin recalled his army. The elves are now alone and outnumbered. To cheer the audience up, our clown Elrond, believing that he sees the reinforcements from Khazad-dûm, shouted, "Look to the north, the dwarves are coming," and pointed towards the rising sun in the east. That's quite a minor detail, but still extremely funny. So now the decimated elvish forces stand by the wall of the city and the orcs are coming towards them. You might think it would be wise to use the walls, they might give the elves some advantage, it's almost as if they are designed to do exactly that. But Gil-galad has a better idea. He orders that his forces run towards the enemy, exposing themselves to attack from every side. But was I really expecting military expertise from elves who fought in countless battles across thousands of years? Oh, how naive of me. Anyway, then Ada wounds Arondir, lethally it would seem, but there is no death scene, so maybe he'll come back. Then orcs finally breach the wall and enter the city. There seems to be no more defenders on the walls. Speaking of which, look at the part of the wall where the machine was doing its very slow job. Is it really the thinnest? For me it's the same as any other part. Oh, and do you remember that I mentioned the sun rising? You may perhaps remember also that the orcs literally burn when they are touched by the rays of the sun. Well, not anymore, now they are immune. With that silliness dealt with, we've got only one scene to go. Ada fights Elrond, defeats him, doesn't kill him though, and finds Galadriel's ring on him. How predictable. How stupid. How lucky that it is over. So ends the episode. And now we know that Gil-galad just stood around the whole day and he is a terrible tactician. Elrond doesn't know where north is, either that or the sun moved to the north, and he had the ring on him. He had all the reasons not to take it with him, it is counterproductive, it can only fall into the hands of the enemy, the risk is simply too great and the benefits are almost non-existent. However, the ring needs to be on the battlefield in order for the plot to happen. Of course, this cannot be a motivation for Elrond, but his reasonability and our sanity is sacrificed on the altar of the terrible plot. Elrond is a clown, and as he already gained that title, let's just add that he is a moron. Alright, let's summarize this tragedy we witnessed. First, some remarks on combat in this episode. So, there is a pathetically low number of defenders, we never see more than about a dozen of them. Secondly, no battle formations. The only exception is the elven cavalry charge, but it is never completed. Thirdly, terrible tactics with such examples as city assault without cover, cavalry fighting in the forest, and leaving the battlements to charge the enemy. Next, extremely poor siege equipment. I don't think that we see more than 3 ladders, useless wall breaker, and this mysterious machine which is destroyed by TNT. Then, as you can see in this scene and many others, armor doesn't work except when it's plot armor. Finally, the numbers on each side are unknown. As a result, the tension we are supposed to feel is weakened. Most of the time we don't know who has the advantage and how does the situation change. There are very few establishing shots, we rarely get an overview of the battlefield, leaving us none the wiser about the current state of the battle. All in all, the battle on its own is simply very poorly made, and that's without even taking into account the characters of the story. Speaking of which, I noticed a trend that is quite prevalent in this episode, and that trend is unintentional storytelling. In other words, the creators want to achieve something and they don't really care about the way they reach that goal, and the byproduct is something they didn't really intend to show us. Here are 3 examples. Firstly, Sauron apparently has better things to do than making sure that the rings are being made. What these errands of his are, we don't know, but we must assume that they are more urgent than the rings. Of course, that is if we follow logic, and that's exactly where we make a mistake. So, in order to let Celebrimbor escape, the creators make Sauron a careless buffoon. And it's a shame, because it would be quite simple to establish something that distracts him for a moment. The next example is Elrond. He just appears out of nowhere to save Galadriel. Why did he join the fight only now? Well, so that we can have a surprise revelation when Galadriel is in danger, but in order to achieve that, we must assume that Elrond just waited there and watched other elves die from the bushes. And finally, we learn that Elrond doesn't care for the lives of the elves inside Eregion. He launches a trebuchet projectile towards the city. And yeah, he kills an orc that way, and it might make for a cool death scene, but it shouldn't go hand in hand with him forsaking his moral code. All of these examples I already mentioned separately, but I wanted to point out that they are a part of a larger tendency, and they are symptomatic of the incompetence of the creators of the show. In order to achieve some dramatic tension, they sacrifice logic and tell the stories that, as I am certain, weren't what they wanted to convey. Now let's finish it off with summarizing the plot. The orcs start the siege of Eregion, they magically block the river, assault the city, and then they are attacked from behind by the elves, who stop to save Galadriel, then attack again because they won't give up just because of her, and finally they are almost all killed. Elrond, by his own description, is a fool because he brought the ring to Adar for no reason. Meanwhile, in Khazad-dûm, Durin and Disa forget that overthrowing a king usually requires some action regarding the king, and they are surprised when the old man goes mining. In order to stop him, they need their entire army, so they cannot help the elves. Finally, Celebrimbor discovers that Annatar is Sauron, finishes the 9 rings for him anyway, then realizes it might not be the greatest idea, runs away because Sauron has more important business to do in the land of none of your business, but once he gives the rings to Galadriel, he goes back and is not for the first time in this episode surprised that Sauron is actually quite good at dark magic and all of his companions die as a result. Oh, Amazon, maybe battles are just not for you, let others film them. But you may be quite good at making documentaries about dam construction. Thousands will thank you for your contribution to hydraulic engineering. Alright, so there you have it. Episode 7 is done, there is only 1 left. After that, as I told you, we'll do the War of the Rohirrim review, and we'll finish the series off with the whole Season 2 analysis. I hope to see you there. As always, I thank you for your attention, for your comments and all your support. I hope to see you again very soon. Fare you well, Nova Year. They have so much to catch up with, but who would care for character when we get out... Damn it. He takes responsibility for letting Sauron realize his plans. There are elements he simply doesn't have to create, like mouses, for example. Like mice, damn it, English.
But my hate is stronger. But my hate is stronger. But my hate is stronger.
Right now, you little hobbitses.